Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from 12 group. We will explain about understand curriculum issues. There are 2 points. First, concepts of progressions, and the second, planning a curriculum for intercultural communicative competence. I'm Iswatun Hasana for the first speakers. I will explain about concepts of progression, and my friends Yaomi Lailatul Farida will explain about planning a curriculum for intercultural communicative competence. Concept of progression. In FLT, progression in learning is usually thought of as linear and cumulative, with each stage depending on preceding ones, a journey or pilgrim's progress, a series of steps up a mountain, a straight and narrow path beset with difficulties and dangers, towards a distant goal which few but the truly devoted ever reach. Dream 1978, page 5. The early steps being easier than later ones. The concept of step-by-step progression is also evident in currently dominant modes of assessment where a quantified scale suggests progress upward. This approach serves well the requirements of societies, namely that certificates should be used for allocating individuals to positions in this economy, and then in society as a whole let gatekeeping function. The objection to this view of progression include one from the learning perspective and one from the perspective on definitions of what is to be learned. Briefly, the former suggests that learning is not necessarily linear and step by step. Gibbs 1994. Learners often need to revisit issues and encounter them in different contexts and perspectives. From the perspective afforded by definitions, each component of intercultural competence is interrelated with others, and with language competition in ICC. This includes the possibility of presenting one before others, knowledge before skills, for example. Another issue raised in the earlier discussion of definitions is also relevant to curriculum planning. This implies a minimal element of progression and raises the question whether a curriculum should use such a threshold as a point of orientation. The curriculum might be designed to ensure that the threshold is attainable, but it might also include elements which take learners beyond the threshold, although not necessarily in a linear or step-by-step fashion. The threshold is also a possible point of orientation for assessment and certification purposes. A threshold of intercultural communicative competence. The notion of a threshold in foreign language competence was introduced in the work of the Council of Europe team. The concept is closely related to the use of the native speaker as a model for the language learner until he has reached full native-like command of the foreign language. The learner, co-learner, may be regarded as always being on his way towards this full command. Until the native-like command is reached, it is argued learners need to perform adequately in communication situations they meet. Education is, however, difficult to define since it involve social acceptance by native speakers, as well as differing degrees of precision in linguistic performance according to the demands of the role the learner has in. Furthermore, Fan A. Key suggests that a level defined as adequate must also have pedagogical adequacy. Example, the potential for further development toward the native speaker's ideal. A definition of a threshold level for ICC would differ from Van Eyck's approach in a number of ways. First, since the competence of the intercultural speaker is different from that of the native speaker, and it's attainable by language learners, the notion of adequacy as an interim and imperfect stage of learning is replaced by adequacy defined as the as the as the ability to function as an intercultural speaker. When the language learner has reached this stage, they need to go no further. In time, a threshold for ICC will be defined for each context and will not be an interim attainment. A stage on the way to a goal, but rather the goal itself. Example, the ability to function as an intercultural speaker. The notion of stage on the way to a desirable goal is replaced by the notion that the goal may be more complex in some circumstances than others, and therefore the demands on learners greater and more complex. This will depend, for example, on opportunities for face-to-face interaction, or on the emphasis given to each skill, or on what knowledge of another country and culture is still to be necessary. In a given case, a learner can be deemed to perform adequately when they can perform to the satisfaction of all concerned, discluding themselves in all the situations they actually meet. This presupposes that the prediction of what a learner is likely to meet has been accurate, and those situations do not require competence or objectives within them which were excluded in the original definition for the particular learning context. This in turn implies that performance can be less than satisfactory and more than satisfactory, and perhaps even more refinements of judgment can be devised as an answer to the question whether it is necessary and possible to define different levels of attainment for purposes of certification. It is also important to bear in mind that performance is used here to cover all the objectives of ICC, including those of knowledge and attitudes, for example, which do not necessarily involve interaction with others. I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Yomi Lalatul Farida, is the second speaker from 12 group. I will explain about planning a curriculum for intercultural communicative competence. Although I have argued that curriculum must be planned for each context, I propose to set out the general process involved as a consequence of the view of ICC taken here. I shall do so by suggesting a number of spirit stages of analysis and decision making, although some overlap is inevitable. Planning a curriculum for intercultural communicative competence has 6 stages. For the first stage is the geopolitical context, an analysis of what might be meant by ICC in the situation in question. If learners live in a situation where they have no foreseeable face-to-face interaction with native speakers of a language, their needs will be different from those who are in constant contact as visitors or hosts, or those who mainly use the language as a lingua franca. The language as a lingua franca. This analysis has to draw upon a societal as well as an individual perspective. Individual learners' foreseeable needs may differ from the general level of intercultural contact in a society as it currently exists and as its body politic perceives the future. And for the second stage is the learning context. An analysis of the learning location and other parameters. In some circumstances, the option of fieldwork may not exist or the opportunities for independent learning through the media may be limited. Science curriculum are usually determined to some degree by bodies other than the teacher and learners. It is also necessary to analyze the parameters set by such bodies in order to see whether there are constraints imposed which contradict the objective of ICC, for example by those responsible for certification. And for the third stage is the developmental factor, an analysis of the cognitive and affective development of the learners. Although individual learners develop at different rates and in different ways, consideration must be given to this element in the teaching and learning. It needs to be a constraint in the teacher may be decide that exposure to, to certain kinds of learning experience in various locations can be successful despite the apparent lack of readiness of the learners involved. It may, however, be the case that the teacher decides that some objectives are appropriate for their learners. And the fourth stage is identification of objective. The decision about which objectives should be set as the guidance for the curriculum is made in the light of the preceding stage of analysis, objectives, and further specification as suggested in Chapter 3. For the skills, knowledge, and attitude for intercultural competence need to be complemented by similar objective and specification for linguistic, sociolinguistic, and discourse competence. And for the fifth stage is the ICC threshold. At this point, it is useful to specify as a summary of preceding stage the threshold or goal of ICC for the learners involved. The definition should include reference to the following: the geopolitical context, the present and foreseeable needs and use of the particular language for learners, the country in question, described in terms of the country's political, commercial, and other relevant relationship with countries where the language is spoken natively, and or in terms of the use of the language as a lingua franca and the advance which that might bring. And the next, the location and parameters of the teaching and learning situation. The time available for learning and the methods and materials which might be include the availability and nature of contact with other speakers of the language, native or not, and the cultures which they embody. And the next, the situation in which it is foreseen learners will draw upon their ICC specimen example of intercultural communication situation and of the competence needed from a situation where learners have no personal contact with speakers of the language and do not need the skill of real-time interaction. For example, to a situation where learners' daily recruitment and experience depend on successful interaction with a constantly changing flow or other intercultural speakers on the language is lingua franca. And for the last stage is sequence in the curriculum, ordering and prioritization of objectives. Although I have argued against traditional conception of linear and cumulative progression, it is possible to prioritize the edge and corners of the jigsaw and consider their relationship to the different locations and opportunities for learning. Since some objectives may have been excluded for a particular group of learners, each jigsaw will be different after the frame has been prioritized. The choice The choice of element within the jigsaw can be made as a function of the interest of the learners, and it is at this point that consultation with learners is productive. That's all from us, and thank you for the participation, and I apologize if many mistake. The last I say, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. See you and